not your ass. You will not laugh. You will not cry. You will learn by the numbers. I will teach you. Now get up.
Good evening, friends. It's Friday, which means it's time once again for another entertaining episode of Hobbservations on Roads to Liberty, part of the Think Liberty Network. That's think-liberty.com for all of your liberty podcasting needs. Think-liberty.com or wherever you listen to podcasts. I think we're on all of the apps. Tonight, we got him once again. It's the man himself from Montana, Lyman Bishop of Hoplite Armor. Good sir, how are you doing tonight?
I'm doing very well, thanks, brother. How are you?
Oh, it's always good to have you on. Whenever you're on, I always have a good time talking to you. So tonight, I wanted to get an update on your gubernatorial candidacy up there in Montana, talk about some of the new things coming out. I think we're going to try and do something that we've been wanting to do for the past couple of weeks, where we have some viewers maybe jump into a live stream and ask a couple questions for a couple of minutes. If that works out, then we'll try that. So before we get started here, why don't you let everybody know who you are, what it is you do, just in case we have any new viewers here.
Sure, right. Okay. My name is Lyman Bishop. I am the CEO and founder of Hoplite Armor. We do a lot of new and unique armor design systems. My background is in mechanical engineering, so new product design and development was always my specialty, with a focus on human factors engineering that carried over into body armor, starting back really as early as 2001 in some of the basic systems. Hoplite Armor was the first to openly sell high-end military grade, or in fact better than military grade body armor, to the U.S. civilian market. And I am now, as you know, running for governor of Montana on the Libertarian ticket.
Awesome. That is awesome. And so since we're talking about that right now, how is that going? Have you got any more feedback since last time?
So, you know, what's interesting, my name has been excluded from the polls.
I know how
and
that
should not surprise anybody. But when the polling companies call and they ask about the different, races going on, and when they get to the gubernatorial election, they'll ask about the Democratic candidate, they'll ask about the Republican candidate, but they do not mention my name. So I'm quite certain that the numbers that are being posted are inaccurate. They show me at, I think, an overall 6%. And I'm quite certain we've got a considerable amount of larger support.
Well, I certainly hope so. I think that Montana deserves somebody like you to go ahead and lead them into the future. Just one quick note on my end over here. I mean, I know exactly how you feel. I am running for House of Representatives here in Nebraska, and when I get called by local media or newspapers or anything like that, they usually ask me a couple of questions, and we'll look at the schedule and see about an interview, and we'll get back to you later, and then they never get back to me. I got a call today from a local TV station in Iowa that has coverage from Iowa, South Dakota, and Nebraska, and they're going to set up an interview with me. So hopefully that works out. But yeah, man, as far as like running third party or like the outsiders and everything, you ain't kidding. It is blackout, especially in this election cycle.
Yeah, especially in this election. And I think especially with the message that I bring of constitutional restoration, that's definitely something that the powers that be want to keep us away from. But I will tell you, I have had a lot of success in getting on different radio programs. PBS came out here and did an interview a little while back that I forget the exact date that it's airing, but it's airing sometime in September and then again in October. So we're getting some of that coverage. And I laid it on pretty thick with PBS too. I gave them a good solid I'll say 75% dose of me, which is more than most people get. So we'll see how that goes. But, the people of Montana are very like-minded, with the things that I talk about. We don't want to be bothered by, well, just about anybody, let alone a federal government gone wild. So it'll be interesting to see how things shape up, even outside of the election.
Hmm. Yeah, I am really looking forward to see just how far you get. I have no doubt in my mind that I'm probably going to get next to nothing in my race because one, I haven't been campaigning very much. I got the new baby, and I think that a move to
Right.
Washington D.C. at this point would be the last thing that I need in my life, and the Rona doesn't help either. But speaking
Right.
of, if I could just focus on me for just one more second here. Speaking of me with the new kid, anybody who has been watching the show for a while knows that I used to drink on our interviews, and this is actually the first Guinness I've had since January. When I found out my old lady was pregnant, I stopped drinking in solidarity with her. Now that he's out, cheers.
Well, good for you. Yeah, I rarely drink myself, maybe once a year. Yeah, I'm always careful because I figure if a kid gets hurt, somebody's got to drive them to the hospital, and I might as well be sober for that. And I was
Yeah.
just never too big into drinking, honestly. But every once in a while, it's good to do. Old friends or the right circumstance, why not?
Yeah, it takes the edge
And
off everyone.
congratulations, by the way, on your new child. Now it's a boy, I believe. What's his name?
His name is Drexel Elijah. Drexel Elijah
That's
Hobbs.
awesome.
Yep,
Right
yep.
on.
Yeah, I wanted to do a different middle name, but my wife was not too fond of the middle name that I chose. I wanted a German first name because my mom's side of the family is German, and I wanted a Cherokee middle name because most of my dad's side of the family is Cherokee, and she did not like Utsadihi as a middle name, which means man killer. It means man
Oh, shit.
killer.
Right. Well, yeah, I guess she probably wouldn't like that. And you're probably better off having a woman that doesn't like that as opposed to one that does. So, good on you.
Yeah, throwing up red flags.
My wife is part Cherokee as well.
Awesome. So we got that. You got that in common. So I
No, she's
saw.
also a direct descendant of General Lee, so go figure.
Well, that's an
Right? That's an
interesting
odd
heritage.
combination.
Yeah, no kidding.
It is. It is. No doubt.
So I saw the other day, kind of moving away from the politics stuff and into the other side of what it is that you do. I saw the other day you posted up some pretty interesting new products that's in development. It looks like you're building a medieval suit of armor over there. Tell us a little bit
Well,
about that.
that's where I started with all this stuff back in 2001. And I may have told you about this some time ago.
Mm-hmm.
2001, DARPA had a project called Exoskeletons for Human Performance Augmentation. And the idea was to increase a soldier's carrying capacity, increase his endurance, his survivability, his lethality. And that's what actually got me into body armor. And initially it was, of course, you kind of shoot for the moon with your ideas. So, I started with an idea for this head to toe armor system, which at the time was ridiculously ahead of anything that anybody was thinking about, too much so to ever sell it as it was at that time. But over the years, you've seen the future soldier system come about, which morphed into the Talos project, which morphed into what they're doing now, and I don't even know what they call it, but my sources tell me that they've been testing some hard armor extremity protection, and it's going to be interesting to see what that looks like, because I'm almost certain, right there you go, you're looking at femoral plates and plates. I don't know if you can turn that image, but if you can, you might see it better. And so the idea there is to apply the armor where it is needed most, the femoral artery, right? So what the idea is, and you can see where I'm going with it. Of course, you've got chest plates, side plates that are kind of a standard, and already have augmented that with the shoulder plates. So the femoral plates are kind of a natural extension of that. Most people are trained to shoot center mass, covering the shoulders, covering the femoral. It's sort of covering that extended area, right, where stray shots might hit shoulders, femoral, and so that seems like the natural evolution. In fact, that's what I'm starting with next. It won't be the shins and the forearms and the femoral to be. First thing I'm rolling out with is the femoral. Having the molds put together now, hoping by the end of the year. I've got some prototypes in the hands of some people that can fabricate the carriers for me. There you go. And now, what's interesting about this, and really about armor in general, is that when you look back at the history of armor, the shape of the armor, the coverage area, what you're looking at is just a modern version of what the Greeks wore, almost to a T.
Right.
And I guess it makes sense. The human body doesn't change over time. Only the threats do. And so we kind of reach that ebb and flow back and forth between lots of armor, no armor, back to armor, extending armor. It's always an evolution, which is something I really enjoy. I think when I'm done with this, I'll start getting into ammo and start penetrating armor.
Yeah, that does seem to be the evolution where mankind develops a weapon, and then mankind develops a protection mechanism from that weapon, and then mankind develops a better weapon, and so on and so forth. We had full suits of steel plate, and then they came out with arrows and sword shapes that could penetrate it, and then they downgraded it. They figured that maneuverability and not getting hit in the first place was going to be the better option, and then of course firearms, and then they just no armor at all, and then ceramics and better grades of steel, better grades of steel initially, and then ceramics, and now the polyethylene stuff is, and now we're armoring back up again, and now the army's developing those hot rod 855 and M80 A1 penetrators that I don't honestly, having looked at the numbers of those and knowing how they work, I don't think those ammo types are going to be long for this world, because those things put so much wear and tear on the guns. It's insane. But it's a matter of time before they come up with a reliable and not rip the gun apart ammo types that are going to tear through, even level 4. And then we'll be back to maneuverability versus protection, and then they'll come up with something new, and it just goes on and on. And just an interesting thing about armor. I watched a video a long time ago, and I probably would be able to find it if I put the effort in. But I watched a video a long time ago in I think it was in Switzerland, where they had a historical European martial arts reenactor, HEMA reenactor, in a full suit of plate armor, and they had a modern day Swiss soldier with all of his gear, and then they had a firefighter, and they did like an obstacle course, and the guy in the steel plate armor won. He was more maneuverable and more agile than a firefighter or a modern day soldier wearing full steel plate and carrying like a sword and
like
everything.
Medieval steel plate, I presume.
Yeah, medieval steel plate, and it really goes to show that a lot of the armor types that we have now, not saying your armor types, but I'm saying a lot of the stuff that the military soldier has now it's not ergonomic. The kinesthesia, or whatever that long K word is that goes into working with the human body mechanics. It really kind of blunt force trauma, the protection versus the ability to move. And looking at your designs, like the hard armor shoulder plates that you have versus what I was issued, the DAPS soft armor. Your stuff is it's more protection, and it seems like it works more with the human body. And I'm very interested to see how this other extremity coverage that you're developing right now is going to provide an increased degree of protection as compared to what we have right now, while also simultaneously working better with the human body.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I think the femoral plates are kind of a given. That's a real simple solution. Not going to have much of an impact on mobility. Certainly will add that extended coverage. I'm looking at here is that's just a guy running an obstacle course.
I think that was what.
Yeah. So
Still there?
Yeah. So I think the femoral plates are pretty simple enough that I don't foresee any issues with regards to any impact on mobility. But definitely covering that area. That's one thing that a lot of people want to see that I have been working on that I haven't shown pictures of is a groin plate, because that's right there, and you don't really want to get hit in that area. So I do have something like that. I figure you were probably going to ask about that at some point, so I'll answer before you ask.
Yeah.
But yeah. So frontal coverage. That that's really what I'm focused on, and I went back and forth between how to put this thing together. Worked with a lot of different groups of people to that conclusion, because I was wondering, should we try to cover the outside of the leg, protect what's there from lateral impacts. But I think more and more, especially with the conditions that you're likely to see in this country, the frontal protection is best suited for what we're trying to do. And there's a lot of things we can do once we put this thing in place, and we've got these plate pockets connected to the leg by way of a couple of horizontal straps and a vertical support strap. It's not too hard to imagine integrating like a drop down holster into the thing or something. So that's kind of where we're at now, dialing in that carrier and everything we want with it, all the different options. Try to keep it simple, but there's a lot of people that very much enjoy augmenting their kit, so I'll try to put something in there for everybody.
Yeah, that was something I was going to bring up next, was the protection of the groin and hip area, because a lot of the discussions that I'm seeing when I go to Facebook and people are talking about tactics and whatnot, there was some people are just like, with the proliferation of body armor in this country and the potential with civil unrest, with the exception of a few states, there aren't a whole lot of restrictions on body armor, and anybody can get it. It's not just guys with like minds like you and me. We've been seeing that the left is also starting to arm and armor up now, and a lot of these people that are in these urban areas that are rioting and looting and destroying, some of them are wearing body armor and plate carriers. Some of them look like they don't have any plates in them, but whatever. But one of the things that I see people say a lot is don't aim center mass, aim for the pelvis. You shatter a pelvis and somebody is out of the fight. They're not going to be able to walk anymore, and the pelvis and hip area is every bit as wide as your torso. You just have to aim down a little bit and you're going to end up taking somebody out. So
that's very true.
Yeah, so you're ahead of the excuse me, you're ahead of the curve on that one.
I've heard a lot of people say the same thing over the years, and certainly that played into what I'm doing. And what's interesting that I took from what you just said is everybody wants body armor these days, not just the left or the right, but we had a guy call up, a month ago, whatever it was, and he had some questions, and we were, the guy that answered the phone was explaining, how well it would work, when shouldering a rifle, and the guy got upset, because he doesn't have, maybe he was anti-gun, maybe he was a lefty, I don't know, but either way, he wanted armor too, and I found that very interesting. It's not just, those of us who own and know how to use weapons, it's just about everybody.
Yeah.
And that does also say a lot about the times we live in, unfortunately.
Yes, very, very unfortunately. So, wanted to shift gears here a little bit. You were on the Bearded Liberty show a couple of days ago with our good friend Justin Smith, and one of the things that you talked about was the possibility that this country might not survive this year in the way that we know it, with 50 states and the territory that we have. And you were talking about secession. And one thing, and I just, this, we can just spend a couple of minutes on this, but one thing that I have never heard anybody bring up, and I don't know if there is a constitutional mechanism for it. I don't know what the legalities or what the precedents or even what the procedures would be for it. But people talk about secession of states leaving the Union, but nobody's ever said anything about expulsion from the Union, where we have...
Oh, that's an interesting idea.
Right. We have these very dissident, borderline insurrectionist territories, especially out there on the West Coast, with Portland and Seattle and most of Southern California are acting a fool. And while there is the Calexit movement where California is trying to secede, nobody ever really talks about sending them on their way rather than allowing them to leave. Do you know, would there be any type of precedence for that?
I don't think there's a precedent for that. Certainly not in our country. Globally throughout history, I don't know. I mean, certainly there have been groups of people that have been expelled from different nations over the millennia. But when you talk about secession, there's a few things to keep in mind. All right. So legally speaking, state constitutions are the legally binding agreement by which any state joins the Union. Within the pages of that document are certain key precepts that set the boundaries by which these two entities, the state and the federal, will work together. Some states have what's called an abolishment clause. Montana is one of those. Article 2, Section 2 of the Montana State Constitution states that Montana has the right indefinitely to abolish its form of government as it sees fit and to operate as a free, sovereign, and independent state. So when entering the Union in the beginning, the Montana State Constitution was written in such a way that the Union was rather loose. And I think maybe there was some, people were a little bit tentative perhaps about joining the Union, and it would seem for good reason when you look now at modern America and you see what we're dealing with. That's, again, legally speaking, that's one of the issues that any state that wants to secede is going to have to contend with. I hold the position that any state should have the right to do the same, but that's not always necessarily the case in terms of, again, that legally binding agreement. When you talk about states like California or Oregon or Washington, there's one cautionary point that I'll bring up, and that is that if these states were allowed to secede or if they were expelled from the Union, they would no doubt seek partnership with some of our worst enemies. China comes, and I'm quite certain that those entities already have worked together in some way, shape, or form, whether that be a very loose collaboration just in the form of, let's call it like-mindedness, or whether it's more nefarious. I really can't say. I don't dare to speculate, to buy into conspiracy theories, and there's certainly a lot of those floating around regarding that issue. So, I would just say that, be very careful about expelling a state like California and turning them loose because, number one, they got a big economy. I think that's of interest to the
Yeah.
nation as a whole.
Oh shit! Did we lose Lyman?
It looks like he just pooped out.
All right. Well, let's Yeah, it looks like his internet bandwidth must not be. He was kind of.
He was a little jittery.
Yeah, I'll send him a message here real quick.
I wanted something to edit tomorrow, anyways.
Yeah. So, anyways, yeah, like he was saying, we'll see if he jumps back in here in a second. What he was saying about expelling a state or a region like California or the West Coast, Oregon, Washington, those areas, or not necessarily the whole state, but certain parts of it, is the possibility that they're going to kind of glom on, sour grapes style to jump into bed with places like China or one of the other bad actors.
There used to be when I was in middle school or something. There was some middle school level series of books about the United States splitting up, and every region that had split up had an outside actor that was helping it out.
Mm-hmm.
Like the left coast was being backed by China. The middle of the state was being backed by Russia, and I don't remember what the East Coast was, but there's probably some weight to be put behind that. I'd completely forgot about that series of books until you brought that up just now. That
Mm-hmm.
And there's that meme. What is it? Somebody posted it. It was a Russian truck throwing crates out.
yeah. It's the middle of the Boogaloo, and a Cadillac Escalade drives by, and some guys in Adidas track suits throw a crate with Russian writings. Da, comrades, do Yates.
Yeah. I'm hoping somebody else in our chat read those seditionist books that I was reading as a middle schooler. Doesn't look like. Man, I completely forgot. I'm gonna have to go Google that when we get done here to figure out what those books were. There's a whole series of them.
Yeah, and that's it's not outside the realm of possibility, because right now the United States is the world's sole superpower, and we tend to get into everybody else's business. But if you think about the United States splitting up into 2, 3, 4 independent countries, the amount of power that we wield would. Oh, there he is. Hey.
Yeah, I had to come on through my phone.
That's okay.
Montana internet, man. What are you going to do?
Your phone's got a better camera than your computer does.
The sound is better too. So,
all right, there we go.
Cool. So, I don't know where it left off in what I was saying, but effectively what I was trying to say is that letting states like California walk could prove dangerous, right? Because they're no doubt working with or would be happy to work with, our enemies. Let's just put it that way. So that's a bit of something to learn about.
Yeah, that's what me and Ben were talking about while you were trying to jump back on. Was he brought up a fictional book series that he read when he was a kid. It was like a middle school level book series, but it's like the United States ended up balkanizing into 3 or 4 separate countries, and each new country had an outside actor that was heavily influencing their politics and their way of life. And you did bring up a really good point. It's something that I've thought about to when you have either a secession or an expulsion from the Union is, especially with an expulsion, with the type of sour grapes attitude where it's like, a bad breakup. It was like, oh, well, we'll just run off to China or whatever and be friends with them. And we've already seen precedent with that already. Dianne Feinstein's limo driver that she had for 20 years was a Chinese communist spy.
Oh.
And yeah, and then we also have an NYPD officer was recently arrested for also being a Chinese spy. He was spying on the Tibetan diaspora in New York City for the Chinese government.
Well, right. None of that surprises me at all. And I, that's exactly the sort of thing that we're going to face, whether anybody secedes or not. But again, Montana have, and I believe there was one or two others, and I can't remember who they were, but that abolishment clause written into the state constitution at least provides a legal pathway for that to take place. And is secession what I want? No, but in light of what's going on, I really do think that more than likely is the inevitable. There was a Russian political strategist maybe it was even 10 years back, that foresaw the United States fracturing into 5 separate territories, 5 separate nations. And now you've got Alberta and Saskatchewan in particular that want out of Canada. I've got to imagine that some of those northern territories want out of there as well. It's really, Quebec and British Columbia that I think are the most liberal. Quebec in particular, and they've threatened to secede, and that's how they kind of hold the whole nation hostage and get what they want. But enough people are starting to realize that, let them go, either that or we'll go. And no doubt you're going to see a reshaping of some of these borders and territories within North America. At the very least, you're likely to see some of that even in South America as fallout from whatever happens here. So, who's to say where all this stuff's going to go? But it's interesting times to live in. I'll say that. There's no other time in history that I think I'd rather be alive. So many interesting things to be involved in. And, I think of it as like proving grounds for eternity. But that's another subject altogether. And I started looking in the comments when, and sorry, I'm down to 10% on my phone. It may kick off for too long, but I was looking at some of the comments. People were talking about lefty militias, right? And who do we got now? I forget what they call themselves, the not fucking around or something like that, right? These guys marching around. And even a while back, I remember seeing something about, some trained professionals that were working with Antifa. So even if you don't get secession, I think you're probably going to get some measure of civil war. And well, these things happen. I'll just say it again for the 100th. I'm glad I'm in Montana. Yeah.
I'm glad you brought up the prospect of redrawing borders and everything kind of being moved around a little bit, and also the fallout from a dissolution of the United States or a dissolving of the United States. Something that I say regularly on this show and other shows is that in the event that something would happen to the United States, when we or anybody else bombs the Middle East or Iraq or whatever, when Iraq burns, it sucks for Iraq. When Afghanistan burns, it sucks for Afghanistan. But when the United States burns, it's going to suck for the entire world. And there are going to be repercussions globally probably for decades, if not a century or more. I mean, we saw, we're still dealing with the fallout from the post-World War I era with the Sykes-Picot Agreement. That whole thing just completely wrecked the Middle East, and we're still dealing with all of that. So tearing down the United States is going to be it's going to be awful, and I'll leave it at that. But one of the interesting little thought exercises that I'd like to go over with you, because I haven't heard your opinion on it yet, is in the event of a U.S. balkanization and a redrawing of the borders and 2, 3, 4, however many new countries come up, like, what do you think that those regions would look like? Because I've got my own ideas, but I'd like to hear what you think. Or rather, I have my own ideas of what I would like to see, but I'd like to hear yours first.
And as I try to come up with an answer for what I think in my mind, I'm reminded of the map that I saw put out by this, Russian political strategist, whatever it was. And as I recall, the way he drew it up seemed to make a lot of sense. You had the really liberal West Coast states all grouping up: Washington, Oregon, California.
Mm-hmm.
I think certainly you would see Montana, Idaho, Wyoming, the Dakotas grouping together. I don't know. I think if that question were asked 20 years ago, you would imagine Colorado being a part of that, but I don't think that's true anymore.
No.
Yeah. Texas is being liberalized. And so I see them probably, especially the further you push this down the line, I see them aligning with Colorado and connecting the dots in between. The East Coast, I think that's a given. So, something along those lines. Now, what I'd like to see would be an extension of that core group of states that includes myself, to include Alberta and Saskatchewan. It would help to have a deep seaport. So what you could probably do is bring along parts of British Columbia. Most of British Columbia is conservative. Most of British Columbia doesn't like what's going on. Vancouver's the sort of hub of liberal thinking, and well, they can stand on their own if that's what they want. Meanwhile, we'll take all the deep water ports. I know there's a lot of people in Canada that if they're listening to this, they're getting very excited because that's something that about more and more. And the resources that those states and those territories hold is enough to create one of the most wealthy nations in all of history. So, there's certainly no shortage of opportunity there. And I think circumstances sometimes dictate which opportunities are best suited to the times. And I think that's along the lines of our best case scenario. But I don't necessarily think that's what's going to happen. I think what's going to happen is, and you touched on this earlier, when America burns, the world burns. Well, now we're going to start talking about redrawing lines all around the globe. And I think what they're going to try to do is just draw a big circle, right? Everybody all in one, global economy, global government. This is clearly the agenda of the deep state, and they are very wealthy. They are very powerful. They are currently in control of a lot of things that we should never have allowed them to gain control of. But they've done a good job of, being very sneaky in the way they go about things until the point where they're holding the majority of the cards, and it's a little more difficult to put them in check. So, I think that is probably more realistically what we're going to be looking at. As much as I would love to simply throw the switch in Montana and off we go. If we try to do that, even if we have the legal authority, again by way of Article 2, Section 2 of the Montana State Constitution, I'll say it again: the legally binding agreement by which we joined the union in the first place. That should be enough, legally speaking, for us to do whatever we want. But again, rarely do these things play out. Look at what happened the last time any states tried to secede and how that went. I don't expect it to be a smooth transition. And I don't expect that we'll be successful in that unless everybody sort of almost instantaneously wakes up. And that's a really tall order. I hate to be pessimistic, but I'm not going to sugarcoat things either. I think in order to get where most people that understand our history and the foundations that this nation were built on and actually care about those things, most of those people are on board with that line of thinking. But there's so much of this toxic liberal mentality. It's going to be very difficult to get past that.
Right. Yeah. I agree. So one of the guys over here in their comment section, Paint or Die, says extend the American Redoubt and the Midwest Corridor into the new Southern Federation, if not one country, at least close allies. And that really ties into not necessarily where I see a potential balkanization of this country going, but how I would like to see it go, because I see from Idaho over to Montana, encompassing Wyoming, the Dakotas, and all the way down the Midwest corridor into Texas, excluding parts of like Houston and Austin that have just gone
Right.
out the window. Now, I've never thought about the Canadian annexation or secession or however you want to put it. That Canada has just completely, like, I never even thought about them wanting to jump in on whatever we got going. And my whole idea was, like, from that Idaho, Montana, and on down into the Midwest corridor, we'd have all the agricultural land. We'd have the mineral and forestry resources of the mountain regions in Idaho and Montana. And we'd have the Port of Galveston. We'd have easy access to the Panama Canal. So we'd have easy way to go, Atlantic or Pacific. And it would seem like it would be, even without the Canadian territory, potentially, would be a possibly you wouldn't lose much in the way of material wealth as far as this hypothetical new country goes. And the other things that I see, things like, California, Oregon, Washington, maybe some of the border states like Arizona, New Mexico, or whatever. New England would probably be its own thing. I'd see potentially most of the states that encompassed the old Confederacy doing their own thing again, the Deep South, and maybe Southern Florida doing its own thing, being its own independent nation. That's just kind of what I would like to see, because I think that way everybody would be, if not happy, at least it would be culturally homogenized enough in these particular areas to make everybody content, with the sole exception of the fact that the cultural battle that we have going on in this country now seems to come down to be people who want to be left alone and people who cannot leave them alone.
Well, and there's a wild card in all this too. And this has only recently come to my attention, first brought to my attention by a former Canadian Mountie that's a friend of mine. And apparently there are tens of thousands of Chinese troops in Canada. Okay, and let me tell you why. The Canadians have done a deal with China to allow them to extract resources. The Canadians have recently passed a law called the Investment Protection Act, which essentially says anybody that they allow, any foreign entity that they allow to conduct, extraction on Canadian soil, can likewise bring in security to protect that investment. And so you have a very large contingent of heavily armed and battle ready Chinese troops. I'm not even kidding you. You can look this up. You're going to have to dig for it a little bit. You're going to have to watch a couple Canadian podcasts.
Mm-hmm.
But this is a very real situation, and very much represents a wild card. Here's the other wild card. I can almost promise you, and this is why Justin, I think, was so excited about my UN targets. You are on UN troops on U.S. soil if all of this continues. When the elections come around and chaos, they are 100% try to bring UN troops, and they bring in some of these Chinese. Now, if that does happen, I'm just going to hope that everybody does the right thing by confronting said foreign intrusion. The Montana State Constitution does say that we are not to bring in armed men from outside of Montana to deal with any situation in Montana. So I'm not going to recommend anything that would violate that state constitution. But I will say that I hope everybody does the right thing, if the case, because certainly, if that were the case, it wouldn't be isolated to just Montana. You would see that incursion on the western states first and foremost. And then you would see that following with, other states likely, like my own, that border Canadian territory, and you would have Chinese troops coming south, which to me is absolutely 100% unacceptable and must be met with any level of resistance required to send them packing.
Yeah, I talked to a guy that I work with about all of this, and he's a younger guy, and he asked me if I was a Boogaloo boy. He saw my my little big igloo flag on my toolbox at work, and he was asking like, "What is this all about?" Because he had seen some of the smear articles and whatever, and I got into about a 15-minute talk with him about everything, and he's like, if the United States broke up and there wasn't, a cohesive centralized government, and the U.S. military was starting to fracture and everything, is like, don't you think that somebody like Russia or China or something would invade? And I said, if they were smart, no, because Americans right now might fight like cats and dogs, but as soon as a foreign entity would come onto our soil, I think that would be enough to, like, okay, let's put our differences aside and let's kick these guys' ass, and we can get back to what we were bickering about after they're gone.
But everybody thinks of the UN as our allies. I mean, our own people make up a large contingent of the UN forces. So, and I don't think that in the event that the UN were to intrude on U.S. soil to try to quell any sort of bust a tooth, I don't think they would put our own people in the midst of that, because they would obviously side with the people. That's why they would bring in foreign troops within that UN contingent. But by doing it under the guise of the UN, so many people would just accept that. Unfortunately, your diehard Republicans would probably be begging for that authoritarian assistance. Likewise, your liberals would welcome any communists on U.S. soil. So you've almost got a perfect storm brewing, where you got enough people that are fooled in different ways that would welcome that sort of a thing. And that to me is probably the biggest short-term threat, because at least to me, right? Everything that's going on right now, once the election is resolved, that's probably going to start to pipe down. They're ramping things up because it's an attempt at a power grab. But the bigger threat, I think, is this version of foreign troops here under the guise of peacekeeping. The UN's already been very outspoken about racism in this crisis, and they want to intervene. The Second Amendment creates firearms catastrophe, and they want to intervene. They've been very open about wanting to intervene in the United States for a long time, and that target or poster, as I legally refer to it, is an expression of my disdain for that idea. At no time do I advocate violence. In fact, the only time I would probably initiate any violence is if somebody tried to step foot on my property. Short of that, well, okay, I guess if I got foreign troops on U.S. soil or Montana soil, it may be a different scenario. But it's so hard to know what's going to happen and how you'll react. You never really know how you're going to react to something until you're faced with it. There's been situations where I've thought, oh, if this happens, I would do that. And then something similar to that happens, and you react a little differently. Maybe you thought you would. So a lot of variables there, and it's a dangerous time because of it, and that's concerning to me. But now I'll tell you, and I apologize, I'm down to 6%. If you want to take some calls, we should do it.
Ben, I don't know if we have any calls right now of anybody asking any questions. I put
Well,
the link.
we do, but they've all been zucked, so we can't
Call
actually.
in.
they're all connecting by YouTube, so I
What's
can't.
Okay, so yeah, we've had some good questions over here in the comment section here, and we only got about 8 minutes left in the show anyways, so you know your battery's gonna hold out until the end. So a guy says he needs a blue colander in his kitchen. The holes need to be 5.56 millimeters each, maybe a few that are 0.30. Yeah, and that's the kind of DIY project that you're not gonna find on Pinterest.
Right. Yeah. And, thank God for the red blood of America. Just won't put up with that kind of BS.
Mm-hmm.
No, thank God for it. It's how this nation was built, and it's the only way that it's going to be maintained.
Yep. NC Hurricane Hunter. That's our good boy Rick from North Carolina, who was permazucked. Like I'm surprised at how hard they came at Rick. Like I'm still on Facebook, and Ben is, and Roads to Liberty is, but Rick is banned down to the IP level. And he says, "Dear UN, send bachelors and come heavily armed." And I have to say that with everything that's going on in this country right now, it is the purest form of irony that the "send bachelors and come heavily armed" meme was fostered by an Oregon state senator. I think that is just.
I didn't know that, but good on him. I should also point out, this suddenly comes to mind for whatever reason, Chinese don't wear body armor. Maybe
When
it's
you
that's damn. I don't know, but word to the wise. Now, UN troops may be different, but Chinese troops do not wear armor. So just remember that, everybody out there. Come your way.
Awesome, yeah. So let's see here. Yeah, we got, like, most of the people that are in our comment section right now are commenting through YouTube and not Facebook, which is, well, it's a sad state of the world right now when our core audience is having to come through the secondary.
Yeah, I escaped the great zucking because I had taken a Shopify loan. I'm certain that that's why.
Hmm.
Because Shopify and Instagram and Facebook are all in bed together. And if somebody like me owes Shopify money, they don't want to zuck me because guess what? They ain't getting paid. It's just that simple. It's kind of like extortion. If I'm thinking of the right crime, I don't know if it's racketeering or extortion that describes that. But, I feel like the store owner paying the mob boss to protect me from the mafia.
Yeah.
But, whatever. It's cool. I'm still out there, doing my thing, and I'm able to at least provide for the American people, which is why I started doing this in the first place.
Yeah, and I think that is primarily what sets you and your business apart from a lot of other body armor and tactical gear companies, is that a lot of them are out for a cash grab.
Yeah.
Or I don't want to like disparage anybody's motivations or anything, but they're when you're dealing in things like body armor and tactical gear, your first idea of what your market is military and law enforcement, primarily law enforcement, because the military is not allowed to provide their own gear. And you, on the other hand, have been hitting the civilian market. And from day one, your objective is, if a cop wants to buy my armor, great, but I am there to provide the American people with the tools and gear necessary to protect them in the event of a worst case scenario. And I think that Justin said on his show the other day that you've cornered the market on civilian and affordable body armor, and you disagreed with that, but you definitely have cornered the market on exclusively the civilian market. That, yeah.
I think that's true. The only other people that would probably represent a similar attitude are the people that work as dealers for me. And if a cop is buying from me, he's more than likely a constitutional cop. And I'll give you an example. We did that Hawaiian shirt collaboration with HK. I don't know if you saw that.
Yep.
And immediately there was a swarm of phone calls from cops to HK complaining that they did a deal with Hoplite. Because of course they're under the impression that we hate cops. Why? Because we've been critical of cops, because you shot Americans for no damn reason, and now you want to complain about that. So, I find it very interesting. When I criticized Israel for selling our F-22 secrets to China, I got lambasted by the IDF, and they gave me all sorts of bogus, terrible reviews and all this stuff. The cops were 1,000 times worse. Just let that sink in. The cops were 1,000 times worse than the Israelis. My God, you've sunk to some really low places when all of you damn cops out there got the attitude that you're above the people. And you know what? I'm so proud of the fact that I started selling to Americans, and exclusively Americans, before anybody else, because little did I know, here we go into this police state that's just exploding around us. And it's, to me, it's just disgusting. And so, I'm always going to be outspoken. When I spoke out in December about the UPS shooting, I figured it would be the end of my business, and I didn't care, right? Because I just wanted to say it like it was, and represent the people. And that reminds me of something you said earlier. You talked about running for governor and leadership for the future. I want to be very clear. In no way, shape, or form do I see myself as a leader. In no way, shape, or form do I see any elected position as a leadership position. It is designed to be a representative position. And that alone, we the people, we are a free people. We don't need leaders from anybody. And I'm not saying this to criticize your verbiage, but to clarify a point that I think is very important, because I was called into a meeting with Greg Gianforte, who's the billionaire running for governor of Montana on the Republican ticket. And you'll find this very interesting. So they wanted to meet with me. I made contact with a guy who was friends with a guy that worked with Greg Gianforte. And so I ended up on the phone with this guy, and he wanted to set up a meeting with me and Greg. And I'm sure, fine. I'm not going to turn down a meeting, even though I don't really have anything to say, and nor am I going to give them what they no doubt want. And of course, what did they want? They want me. Well, it's too late for me to drop out. So they're asking me to endorse Greg Gianforte. So back to your first question. How is the campaign going? Good enough to scare these people. All right. And so, I kind of played along. Sure, fine. I'll sit down with you. Let's hear what you have to say. And, here's what I told Greg Gianforte. And I'll tell you, too, because this is true. Under normal conditions, he's more qualified. He's a billionaire. He made billions of dollars. He's employed hundreds of people. He knows how to do all this shit. Plus, he's already a congressman. All right, great. Good for you. Guess what? These aren't normal conditions. Now, and I tell people this too. If you think that this is normal, or that we're going to return to normal, if you think everything's fine, go ahead and vote for Greg Gianforte. Don't vote for the Democrat. Vote for Greg. He can do the job under normal conditions. Considering the extraordinary conditions, you damn well better hope that I get in there, because I'm the only one that's going to do what needs to get done. And it's that simple. And I told Greg, I looked him right in the face and I said, you are the more qualified candidate. You've done this, you've done that. And I said, but God doesn't care about that. God is no respecter of persons. God looks at the heart. And I left it at that. I wanted to see what his reaction to that is, because, he claims he's a Christian, and I tend to believe him. But the question that I have for him is, all right, if you're a Christian, well, do you believe God has called you to this? Has he genuinely spoken to you and called you out to do this? To that is no. And if the answer to the question, do we serve the same God? Do we serve the same purpose, the same country, the same people? Should it not be him that endorses me? I think perhaps it's something to consider. And when I mentioned this to the Republican chair, he said, well, Greg would really have to get to know you first before he could endorse you. And I said, yet you're asking me to endorse him. So, it's really funny how people work. And, you know, what can I say? I mean, obviously we've done good enough that we've got them concerned. Now, maybe they're concerned because it's a close race. I get that, you know. There's only a few percentage points currently in the polls between the Republican and the Democrat, which is sad and for most people surprising. And so I'm sort of that wild card that could tip the scales, but hopefully I've got more support than what they're showing. But, you know, and the downside and the potential danger here is that, you know, we have had Democrat governors in the state for, I think, 16 years now. And the reason being is that we don't have a lot of economic opportunities. And there's a lot of people that live at or below the poverty line, and they're looking for assistance as well. They should. I get it. They need assistance. But they don't need a handout, right? It comes back to the you know, give a man a fish and feed him for a day, teach a man to fish and feed him for a lifetime. And so what we need to start doing is teaching people how to fish in different waters. These people are great at what they do. They know how to farm, how to ranch, how to build. Hell, they know how to fight. But, you know, let's focus that into the modern world, the modern economy, and give them the tools and the education to allow them to succeed in the modern world. And there's a lot of programs that are already in place here in the state of Montana, such as those available through the PTAC offices, which is an acronym for Procurement Technical Assistance Centers. And they help people get different grants, and whether that be to hire new people or buy equipment or get new education. And these are the things that we really need to build on, teaching people to fish rather than giving them a fish. And I understand, look, when you're hungry, just, you know, give me a fish, right? Okay, here's a fish. But while you're eating that, how about I teach you how to catch more? So perhaps there's some middle ground there. You know, and I think that's where the Libertarian Party is supposed to come in, that middle ground. And what disturbs me about that whole thing, and you heard my critique earlier before we went live, you know, the Libertarian Party has not done a darn thing to help my campaign. They came here and met with me 2 or 3 times. They promised to do this, that, and the other. Okay, they don't have any money. Fine, I don't need your money, but I could use other things. And I'm promised other things, but then they dropped the ball. So that's part of why I didn't want to go speak at Joe's rally, because I didn't have anything good to say. It's plain and simple. So, all right. What else you got for me? Let's read more comments while we got a minute.
Well, most people over here have just been saying that, talking about the way to get away from the zucking. Somebody says he shouldn't have used Wix. He should have used Spotify. Mark says that too many Californians are moving to Montana.
Well,
yeah.
and that's true. But a lot of those people that would actually move here, like I said earlier, they do tend to be of the same mind. Not all of them, certainly. And
Right.
we liberals around here, I will tell you that too. Not many, but we've got our share. And it is kind of like a disease, right? I mean, what do? You know, when in doubt, cut it out.
Yeah. Like my mom moved to Idaho a couple of years ago, and she's saying that she's saying that the influx of people from California are driving the real estate market out of the ability for a normal person to attain it. It's crazy.
Yeah, you hear that a lot here, where, you know, families that have been here for generations, the young generation is leaving the state for better opportunities, for better jobs, for better housing markets. And, you know, that's sad. I wouldn't want to see my kids up and move for those. So, you know, I try to create as many opportunities for them as I can under my.
Still there?
I think he hit 0%, Hobbs.
Oh, looks like he died. Okay, well, we've been going for an hour now. Crap. He was about to get into something good, but we've reached our hour point. Everybody, thank you so much for watching tonight. Like, share, spread. Anything you can do to help us get these messages out there is always a good thing. I'm Hobbs. This has been Hobbservations. Roads to Liberty. Ben, why don't you, if you got it pulled up, why don't you pull up some of our merch stuff here real quick?
I don't think I have those saved.
That's okay. My old lady just peeked in the door here. She wants me to come out and have a drink with her. It's her birthday today. She's 32 years old. So everybody wish Angela happy birthday down in the chat. So all right. So yeah.
Yeah, he hit 0 on his phone. He didn't fall asleep. So
yeah, his phone finally died on him.
He warned us.
Yeah, I was gonna tell him to just go and grab a cord, and I would talk to you for a minute. But you know, whatever happens, happens. Yeah, so we're gonna end it here, I think. Thank you everybody for watching tonight. Ben, thanks for oh God, Rick.
Look,
Rick
I'm back.
He went and got a
now
cord.
you're in my private chambers. I had to plug my phone in. Sorry about that.
You are fine. So yeah, we were gonna call it a night anyways. It's actually my wife's birthday today, and she wants me to come out and have a drink with her. So
well, tell her I said happy birthday.
I will. And Rick and Mark are both down in the chat saying post birthday feet.
Oh
feet.
God, I don't want to see that.
My
what
feet
is
are
the
gross.
deal with that, man? That is, I don't even know where that started or why it perpetuates.
I don't know. It's a weird thing. So thank you again, Lyman, for joining us tonight. I really had a good conversation. If it wasn't Angela's birthday, I would say let's stick around and talk for a couple more hours because it's always fun to talk to you. But everybody, Ben's putting the pictures up there of our merchandise store. That's the Roads #2 Liberty.com. We got some pretty cool shirts up there. You can order them. They're drop shipped. They got a lot of different designs and the different options and everything. You can go ahead and support us there. We've been doing this podcast for free for the past like 4 years, and now we're just starting to monetize. So if you appreciate us and the content that we give, please go out and buy some of our stuff and float some money our ways. Lyman, of course, is hoplitearmor.com. Go buy some of his armor. Get yourself armored up. You never know what's going to happen. So thank you, everybody. Thank you, Lyman. Everybody have a good night.